Hey guys, Hayk here. Welcome to the Power of Mindset podcast, episode number 6. I was thinking about what is a good quality story I can share with you from the Power of Mindset book. And I give it a lot of thought about a chapter that's very significant, special for me, and has a very special room in my heart. It's an interview with Steve Ferreira. So Steve is a gentleman I met at the gym when I took fitness seriously and I decided to lose a lot of weight and I decided to run my first marathon. And Steve is a disabled kid who would get to the gym on his electric wheelchair, who could barely talk, barely function. And I met him through just seeing him every morning, and it turned into an amazing interview. I have the interview details in the book, and I actually have a couple of goals with this chapter. I'll read you the goals real quick, and then I'll dive into some of the most powerful lessons I have in the book, thanks to Steve and the interview we had together, and thanks to what he stands for and what he represents, because he's one of the most significant people, in my opinion, that many people don't know about. And I really hope this gives him some visibility. He does do lots of speaking. He does a lot of work for universities, and he does compete at the Special Olympics, and he does really well, by the way. So Steve Ferreira, some of the lessons I'll learn, and I typically, I have goals for each chapter before the chapter gets starts. And with this chapter, I have the goals, I have the interview, and I also have some debrief about what I've learned and some also lessons from the interview with Steve. And the goals on this chapter were to learn that your limitations are an illusion. And that's something Steve talks a lot about. As in, he has all these reasons to be limited. He can't function, he can't walk, he can barely talk. But he figured out a way to remove these limiting self-belief systems. And one of the things he was sharing with me was there's many people who can walk, talk, and they can function fully, but they're more disabled than I am because I have the mindset of why not, and I'll figure it out, versus looking for excuses not to. And that was a huge lesson from Steve, and I'm going to share that with you guys. Second point on this chapter, and I'm going to read this off as well. Understand that excuses are like butts. We all have them and they'll stink. It's a quote from my high school strength training coach. He actually said excuses are like assholes. We all got them and they'll stink. I was being a little politically correct when I wrote the book. Third point, learn that you can do anything, but some things might take longer than others. And that's something that Steve shared too. He said, when I asked him a question, I'll read the question and the answer about what's the difference between him and most. And he was talking about how I can do anything anybody else can, just might take me longer. Understand how your future and past may adversely impact your present. Learn how to use fear to your advantage. Understand why the line between strength and weakness is paper thin. So going back to the story with Steve, this is when I had read a really good book. If you guys know who David Goggins is, so David Goggins was actually introduced to the media world through a gentleman named Jesse Itzler. Jesse Itzler wrote an amazing book. It's called Living with a SEAL. And Jesse is a multimillionaire. At the time, he decided to, pursue the endurance world and do this 100-mile run fundraiser between him and his couple of buddies. And he says in his book that he noticed that there was one guy, he looked like he was 250 pounds, huge, ran the whole 100 miles on his own. And he talks about David Goggins' story, how he met him, how he saw finish the whole thing with, failed kidneys and his toes were bleeding. And the guy finished it. And he was in a place, Jesse was in a place of his life where he was losing almost passion and motivation. And he's like, I'm stuck in the rut. I've got all the money in the world. Everything is great. I almost need some hunger back in my life. And he decides to find out who that gentleman was, flew up, met with him, hired him, brought him back to his house to train him for a month. And the entire book talks about their training camp as far as what they're doing, the mental aspect, the physical aspect, and how Goggins took him to the next level. And this is the book that got Goggins big in the media world. Again, this I learned about him because of that. Now I follow him, and I read David Goggins' book as well. Amazing book, by the way, if you're looking to do some crazy things. So I read Jesse's book. And one of the things I really liked in the book, he talked about how he's got this schedule, 3 hours to yourself, 7 hours of work, and 7 hours of sleep. And I kind of started following that method, right? I would wake up first thing in the morning. I would go to the gym and give me plenty of time to work out, whether if it's 1 or 2 hour run, lifting, whatever I was doing, trying to get back in shape. And then I would have time to myself to read a book or even write my book. So the 3 hours really got me to do things. And there's a huge significance to waking up in the morning, right? The 5 a.m. club. That's first of all, I think you're most productive around the time when nobody's thinking of you, because if you're in the business world or in any world, doesn't matter what you do, there's people thinking of you and wanting things from you. And when they're demanding your time and effort and demanding things from you, it's hard to focus on you, right? You don't want to let others down. So you're putting all your energy and time towards pleasing them and taking care of them and doing things for them and serving others. So to have selfish time to yourself, to think, to be creative, to solve your problems, to work on your fitness, best time is in the morning because nobody's thinking of you, right? So he did it. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I just followed somebody who's doing it at a very high level. And those 3 hours would be great for me to, again, I committed to the marathon. I spent a lot of time in the gym. I was losing a lot of the weight. I was on the treadmill. And every morning, right around 6:30 to 7 a.m., I would see this kid just literally come in through the front doors of the gym. Again, he would kind of push him through, and he had this electric wheelchair. He would get through, and then he was high-fiving people. Everybody knew him. I didn't know him. And he would kind of work his way to machinery. And I would always like keep an eye on him. And I look, and he slides off his wheelchair, finds his way to most of the equipment. I saw him get to the leg press. He was doing leg press. And you can tell his body wasn't functioning like the normal person. His legs wouldn't extend all the way. Arm functionality was different. He stuttered when he talked. I can kind of hear him from far away. But it was very motivating to see this kid just consistently showed up every day. And at one point, I'm leaving the gym. I'll go up to him. I'm like, excuse me. Hey, my name is Hayk. What's your name? And he stuttered. And he told me his name. He stuttered and he said, my name is Steve. And I just told him, I'm like, Steve, just to let you know, like, it's very inspirational to see you here. Like, you are doing so much. I admire you. I look up to you. Hey, keep up the good work. And then we just start talking from that point. My name is Hayk. I'm doing this. And something came to my mind. I'm like, hey, at the time, I really wasn't serious about writing a book. I was just writing a book. Never thought I would publish it. Never thought I would do much with it. I was just writing content, right? Content about the business, content about, positivity, the American dream, you name it. And I said, Steve, I'm writing a book. Would it offend you if I can interview you for, some stories in my book? I don't know when I'll publish, but it'll be a great interview. I would love to learn more about you, because he was still telling me about, he's not just training for anything. He's training because he's competing at Special Olympics. He's been winning, gold and silver at shot puts and discus, and very active. He speaks at universities. He delivers speeches and he runs a program about disabled kids. And he talks about disability often is a mindset, how you're limiting yourself to think that you are. In many cases, there's a lot of disabled kids who are physically disabled, but they're getting more done than a lot of people who don't have any challenges physically. So his message, and one of the things he talked to me about it in his interview, was one of my missions in life is to deliver that message specifically to the world. Let them know you're limiting yourself on what you're capable of. Yeah, if you physically have limitations, you've got better reasons, but doesn't mean you can't do more. And he really motivated me to do more. That interview was amazing for me. And then I'll read you guys the question and a little bit about Steve as well. So the reason why Steve has this, it's a condition called cerebral palsy. Now, he developed it at birth because what happens is when an infant's born, there's a thing called Apgar score. And Steve taught me this, right? He said, Apgar score is, it's 0 to 10. 10 means the newborn is in great health. 1 means they're pretty much dead. Steve was born with a score of 1. And they had to bring him back to life in the process of, pumping oxygen back into his lungs and whatever the medical procedures they need to do. It really impacted his brain. The fact that there was lack of oxygen going to his brain, it impacted his functionality, probably killed some brain cells, and he was disabled since. He was actually adopted. He was born in Taiwan. He was adopted by an American family, both him and his sister. He was a twin. Sister came out okay. He was the one they came out with some limitations. And he took that as fire in his life, and he just completely turned things around. And one of the questions I asked him, and I'm going to read you guys this question. I think this is a big takeaway for me, and this is going to be a good takeaway for you guys, because I had to actually meet up with him at a local coffee shop. And I remember I'm waiting for Steve. We agreed on the time. He shows up with his mom in one of those disability access vans. And then, they pull up, the door opens up, he comes out. He rolls over into the coffee shop. We sit down and probably have the best few hours. It was very slow. It was very difficult to communicate, but the man got it done. I was so inspired by him. And one of the questions in the interview, a few pages into the interview, actually, it says, I'm asking him the question, it's impressive how motivated you are and how positively you see everything. Everyone has a fire in them, something that gets them going, gets them out of bed, and gets them to want to be great. What motivates you? My question is Steve's response. And I wrote down word for word what his response was. Building on what I just said, and he was talking about making a difference in the world, right? Telling people that don't limit yourself. And he said, building on what I've just said, it's people who have doubted me and proven them wrong. There's been a lot of people who doubted him. When I was in high school, One teacher told my mom that she was too optimistic to think that I would be able to go to college. Well, I received my associate's degree from Bellevue College with a concentration in communications. It may have taken me a little bit longer, but I persevered and accomplished it. I'm just like any other person. I can do all the things everyone else can. It just takes me longer. I'm also motivated to help people with disabilities be accepted as regular people. I want disabled people to be motivated to accomplish their goals. I have found joy in helping others. While my own accomplishments motivate me, it brings me joy and gives me strength to help and inspire others as well. And then we go on and ask him lots of questions about excuses, about, how he leads his life, what makes him different. And his biggest feedback was like, just because I am disabled physically, mentally, I am more enabled than most. And I thought a lot about what Steve's message was. And if I think about the coaching piece in my business where I've been asked the question, Hayk, I've hired this person, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. In reality, and I've shared this before in the episodes as well, is we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. In many cases, if I want to be able to have a team or friends that do more and more positive people in my life, in reality, is that what you are, or is that what you want? Because if I'm attracting people who are positive, who are getting after it, who are people like Steve, like I can do kind of attitude, no excuses kind of attitude, why not type of attitude. Well, what if I'm the type of person to always make excuses and, always find ways to almost not, right? And I know a ton of people who have legitimate excuses, as in market is bad, my divorce impacted my life, so I'm negative. Here's why I'm homeless, and here's why my business fell apart. Here's why my marriage fell apart. Now, there's a lot of legitimate reasons behind why people say things don't work. But then you talk to these unreasonable people, the unreasonable thinkers, as in, I made it work despite the issues, right? There's this difference between problem-based thinking and there's the difference between solutions-based thinking. Because to be solutions-based, you have to recognize the problem. And the difference between the people who convert the problem into a bigger problem and the people who solve the problem is we're all faced very similar challenges in our life. Like 98% of cases, most of our issues are the same. Yes, there are exceptions that somebody can be very unique to their problem. And that's a piece that mindset doesn't really help. It's just sometimes bad luck. But majority cases who I've seen, who I've coached, who I've witnessed, who I've known, whether if it's on a friendship level or business level, a lot of the problems were self-imposed in a way that problem happened, here's why I failed. I tried 5 times and I stopped. I tried 6 times and I stopped. And, solving the problem isn't one of those things where we're going to be, I'll be in good mood when I solve these problems. But the reality is solving a problem isn't something you should be getting away from, because when you stop solving problems, probably going to be the day you're dead. In reality, the pain of solving a problem is always in our lives. And that's a piece to when I did commit to my first marathon. And just this weekend, I had a few friends of mine, they read a book named Pedro Scalion. He talked about run a marathon, change your life. And I was asked the question, like, what does that even mean? How does it change your life? And I think my encouragement to people who are considering doing some kind of a difficult fitness goal, doesn't have to be a marathon, but something difficult, like once a year, do something really difficult. And my encouragement is, how can you do something that makes you so uncomfortable that it teaches you a lesson you didn't even think you were going to learn in the first place? And the marathon doesn't really give you necessarily the answer. If you ask me now, 7 years ago when I ran the first one, fast forward, I've done a bunch now. What is the lesson? It's a lesson you have to learn on your own, because the answer comes to you through pain, through resilience, through no one cares, work harder. There's a million different things you can pick up from that. But if I had to share, and this is what I shared to 2 of my peers about, you should commit. It will change your life. How? I don't know. But my answer was this, because every time I would try to get better and faster, and every time I had to do a long run, I would get sore after that. But then I would lose the weight. I would look more fit. I would feel better. I would function better. My brain worked better. My positivity was easier to maintain, to not let the negativity impact my life. All these things drastically started changing. And yes, it did change my life, because there's a piece to maybe some people that don't talk about, run a marathon, change your life, is, can you do it again? In my opinion, anybody can run a marathon. The ones who choose to say, I'll do it again, but I'll do it better. Like, I hire a coach, I'll get faster. I want to get to the next level. I want to run Boston. And I'm not saying you have to get to this high competitive level where it's impacting your life, but if you can do it again, I think that is where the lesson is. If you do it once, then you do it the second time, and you kind of go back and reflect the difference. And you turn this pain into a lifestyle deal, because what it taught me that the most painful workouts were the ones that were giving me the best results. So in a way, I'm looking for the pain. In many ways, again, Steve wasn't waiting for his disability to go away to enjoy life. I wasn't waiting for the pain to go away to say, okay, I'll be comfortable when I'm actually comfortable. But the reality is, discomfort is the teacher. You lean more towards it, you get more out of it. You get physically, mentally, emotionally fitter and healthier. You look better, you function better, you feel better. And you realize all the better that I just mentioned comes from the actual pain. So if you're able to do the long-term things, and you hear the term life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. In reality, life is a marathon. But what does that even mean? Why don't you run a marathon and figure that piece out? And when you do, you realize long-term pain, short-term pain, everything goes into, like it or not, I'm always going to be solving a problem, which is going to have some kind of a pain. Again, mentally, physically, emotionally. And if I'm okay with that, growth comes from it, right? You study, you get your degree. Was that painful? Absolutely. You pass a difficult test. Was it painful? Absolutely. You get through difficult season of your marriage. You fight through, you maintain, you forgive, you include humility, you continuously maintain what you have. And 6 months later, a year later, like, I'm so thankful, instead of walking away, taking the easy route, which is the painless route, I actually stuck through the pain. Good things came out of it. So the reality is, what marathon did teach me, what Steve taught me, well, pain and discomfort and limitations are there to see how bad you want things. And also they teach you the lesson that you should be leaning towards the pain, not avoiding it. Because if you ask yourself the question whether I'm on the right path or the wrong path, the answer comes down, the right path is the more painful one. And have a system of checks and balances that tells you sometimes succeeding at the wrong things could be the greatest failure, not necessarily failing. I've known people, unfortunately, told me as soon as I got into the endurance race, I went through a divorce, I blame the running, I blame the Ironman. And I don't know too much about that part to give anybody advice or talk too much about it, but I can tell you this: you need to be self-aware enough to know, well, whether that relationship was going to end regardless. Maybe that commitment for you to focus on yourself accelerated something that was going to happen anyway. Or did it in an unhealthy way, where there's this funny poster during triathlons and people hold it once in a while. I've seen it actually a couple of times. It says, if you're still married, you didn't train hard enough. It's a funny joke, but I've seen it happen over and over. The question is, did you do it at the cost of something greater, or did you do it and it was complementing something else, right? Was it making you better? Was it making you get up earlier and getting more done, right? Was it making you more positive? Or did it make you just more negative, and now you're trying to succeed at the wrong thing at the cost of something that's more valuable? And that's a piece that there is really no answer. But in majority cases of people that committed to difficult goal, whether if it's a Spartan race or a marathon or a triathlon, their lives have gotten better. And you have to do it to learn the lesson. Quit looking for the lesson in the silver bullet. Do the hard work, right? Go through the pain. And like, as I mentioned, my goal from this chapter that I write at the beginning, what the takeaways are learn that your limitations are an illusion. It is really not that hard to do difficult things. I think life is much harder when you avoid them. So doing the difficult things makes life easier. And I've mentioned this before too. When you control the difficulties, you expect them, you deal with them, you work with them, and you're psychologically more ready for difficult things. When you don't do difficult things, well, life has a way of bringing difficult things into your life. Challenges, adversities, issues, staffing, spousal, children, you name it. And when you're not ready for the difficult things, it gets much harder. Again, similar problems given to majority of people out there in the world, but the ones who deal with it are the ones who are actually handling their pain by choice. Because when the unchosen pain comes in, it's much easier to handle. So hope you guys enjoyed the chapter. That's chapter 13 in the book, The Power of Mindset. Got a couple of more cool stories with you guys I'll share from the book. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to dive into interviews with some amazing people who've made an amazing difference in my life, and they will hopefully make an amazing difference in yours. Cheers.